sound that you have on at your end so that we don't pick up your echo. I can hear an echo from one of you.
I don't know.
Well, what do you mean by that? Do you mean the internal microphone, or that's the only way you're going to hear me?
Do you have earphones? Earplugs?
I do have earphones,
like
yeah.
Walkman earplugs?
No, I don't have them on. I just got them on without that.
If you plug those in, then the microphone at your end will not pick up the sound of our speakers.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Live, on air, this is BTFDtv, and this is Jack speaking, and I'm bringing with you our first host of the Sunday lineup, Jerod. You are now, my friend, on air, live. It's your show. What are your thoughts?
Well, I'd like to welcome everybody to BTFDtv, and I'm going to try to attempt to do a show here. It's kind of about how agriculture really works. The purpose of this might be just to kind of inform, educate, and kind of tell everybody how everything really happens in the misunderstood profession of agriculture. Right, I've got a guest with me, Philip Shaw. He goes under the Twitter handle Agrodome, and I'd like to welcome him to it, and maybe he could tell us a little bit about himself and kind of introduce and see where we go from there. Philip, I think you got to unmute yourself.
All new shows have learning curves, and we're having a sound moment, and we will have our guest dropping in any second now.
Can you hear us, Philip? We can see your mouth's moving, but nothing's happening. Anyway, I'll keep going for a second as we work on that. Kind of what we're looking for going forward is, I'd just like to, again, educate people as to what's really out there. Like, what are people going to do, in regards to how their food is produced and where does it come from? What are the people that are really behind it? I mean, and I'd like to bring in people like Philip and others that can kind of give perspective as to, how we just do stuff out here, how it really works. Mr. Hardy, looks like he just joined us, Devin Hardy.
Hey, guys.
This is Devin Hardy. I'll let him introduce himself.
Hey, Phil.
Welcome, you're on air.
Yeah, go ahead, Devin. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I farm here in central Oklahoma. Raise a few cattle, a lot of wheat, a few row crops. Do a lot of no-till and double crop.
You want to kind of go into, you and I actually talked to you last night about the show and kind of what we were doing and kind of how everything goes on. Your Twitter handle is Hardy Farms. I think some people follow you, some people might know you, some people may not, but kind of give us where you're at and everything.
Hey, can you guys just chat for a little bit and give me just a second? Let me get where I can talk.
All right, we're still trying to get Philip on. Jack, do you have any idea what we need to do there?
I'm wondering if he has a digital block on right now. And in the upper right corner, there is a symbol that shows a mic and a symbol of a camera. And if you would click on the mic one and try talking again, the next choice would be to drop out of the room and come right back in, and it should auto-open the mic again for him. So he should be right back. While we're waiting, and we have you guys on air, why don't we start with, in central terms, how many acres do you guys actually farm? So that people can get a little scale of context. When you guys say it costs me, I'm going to make up a number here, $100 an acre to do something, that becomes real money when you start talking the acreage that you guys have.
Yeah. Well, while they're getting kind of caught back up and back in the call, I'll just give you, for example, this year I'll have about 800 acres of corn. And, it doesn't take much to figure out whenever you're going to, the total cost of corn, irrigated corn anyway, could be anywhere from $700 to $800 an acre. So, you're talking real money whenever you get into those kind of numbers. Your total amount of money that you're spending to raise, like, for example, a corn crop out here. Wheat, we'll typically raise 12 to 1,500 acres of wheat, about 400 cows. That's kind of the scope of my operation. When those guys get back, I'm sure they could kind of hit on what theirs actually is. But there's quite a bit of money involved in just a regular day-to-day operation.
So
I can't say that
800 acres, and you're saying that cost runs $700 to $800 per acre. Is that correct?
Yeah. So to raise a corn crop, you're looking at around $600,000 to $700,000 that you're laying out there.
Full risk.
At least.
Well, minus insurance.
Yeah, that's the risk. And it all that's cash money. It's not where it just floats in imaginary numbers. That's kind of what you actually have to pay.
What? You have to actually pay?
Yeah, believe it or not.
I thought you farmers were rolling in it.
We wish. I got some questions on Twitter from guys that were curious about, how things worked. And one of the things that they really hit on, somebody brought up the MF Global and the Corzine debacle and how it affected hedging and whatnot.
And
here's Phil.
See if, Philip, we can't hear you. Upper right corner, click on the mic when you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can now. Welcome onto the show. I believe that you have a host who's very happy to see you arrive.
Yeah, I'm eating it in here.
Well, after you told me to click on the right-hand side, I clicked on the wrong one and shut everything off. So I don't know if you want my introduction, but I farm in Canada. I'm on the same latitude as Detroit, Michigan, and I do a lot of writing about agriculture and a lot of writing about commodity prices. And I met both Devin and Jerod on Twitter, and they're probably some of my earliest Twitter friends on the farm from way back. And so we talk about a lot of different issues on the farm, whether it's about machinery or whether it's about marketing and a whole host of things. And it's a pleasure to be here today and talk with everybody.
Welcome.
All right, Devin, are you where you can talk, or are you still out and about? Can you hear me, Devin? Okay, we may have lost him.
He's here, but he's muted
Philip,
also, so we're trying to get him unmuted.
Yeah. Can you click your unmute button there, Devin?
Is that it? Can you hear me now?
There you go.
Yes, we can hear you.
All right.
All right.
Let's go back on the subject of how much I farm and kind of what I've got into it. I farm about 1,800 acres, and usually half of that, or a little over half of that, will be into wheat, and the rest will be either corn or full season soybeans. And then I'll get back in on the wheat ground and double crop milo or soybeans back into that. I don't have quite as much cost per acre as Jerod would have in his corn, but and corn isn't our our main. We can't rely on corn here. We don't have enough water, and we usually get too hot, and it's just kind of pretty much something I play around with for cattle feed. But I usually put about $250, $300 an acre into corn compared to Jerod's 700. So there's a big cost difference there.
Yeah, and we're both in Oklahoma. Devin is down by Oklahoma City, and I'm out in the Panhandle. So that kind of, within one state, there's that much variation in just our basic operations. But I was gonna. I've talked with Devin, and I've also talked with Philip, kind of about, we're out here, we're raising all this stuff, and we're trying to, everybody's kind of attempting to make money and all that stuff. But maybe I'll just start out, kind of what got you into farming? Like what, Devin and Philip, we'll start off with Devin, and Philip, you can answer just kind of what got you started.
I mean, I was born a farmer. I mean, I've always been around it, and it's in my blood. I've tried, I've had other careers, but always came back to farming. So it's just something once you're around it, and just kind of hooks you. I mean, even though it's not easy all the time, but it's just something I really enjoy doing. So that's kind of what's got me into it.
Yeah. And Philip, you?
Well, I'm probably one of the more senior guys here among the farmers, but I really admire what my two Oklahoma friends do. Between tornadoes and dry weather and heat, I don't know how a Canadian like me could ever handle that. But the scale of the agriculture where I am is much more like the eastern Corn Belt, where you have smaller acreages, about 865 acres of corn, wheat, and soybeans. My first operating was 23% interest. So I have worked down ever since then. I've seen a lot of hard times, I've seen a lot of good times. And, I suppose as I look ahead, I'm on the other side of the hill versus going up the hill like these two guys. But, here in Canada, I talk a little about agricultural prices and a lot about farmland prices too. And farming is something that I was born to do, but I also get to write an awful lot about it. So that just gives you a start, eh?
Yeah. Well, I'll kind of bounce it back to Philip again, and Devin, when you're not talking, you may have to move it to mute it because I don't know if it's coming back through there or not. But
I'm having some issues with sound here.
Philip, really quick on your Twitter page.
I'm gonna try to find my headphones. Give me.
Okay. On your Twitter page, there's a picture of you with a megaphone. Can you tell me kind of what that was all about? I know we talked about it briefly, but you could inform everybody as to what was going on in that picture.
In 2006, I was asked by the farmers in Canada to help lead a protest against our federal government about the agricultural safety net and stabilization policies we have in this country. And so that picture is me. I led quite a few protests during that year. And in Canada, we had 1/3 of our country is French speaking. And so I helped lead the protest that day in Ottawa. And that's a picture of me with the microphone leading a protest on behalf of farmers. I did the English version, and Pierre Riom from Quebec did the French version. And I had 10,000 farmers in front of me all across Canada, and that's what I was doing that day. I do a lot of public speaking now across Canada, but at that time I didn't do as much. But when you're handed a microphone and there's 10,000 farmers in front of you, it was really quite a moment for me, and something that I felt a chill going up in my spine because I was representing a lot that day. Since that time, agriculture, at least the crop sector, has gotten better. And that's what that picture is all about. And I'll do it again if I'm asked to do it.
Well, it's just a interesting, and that's, I think you told me that before, and it's you're right. You're kind of, when you've got a microphone and you have 10,000 people that are your peers, it kind of puts you in the spot of finding out what you're made of, I guess.
Yeah, it was really quite a day. And, at that time, you got to remember the prices were a lot lower, and times were a lot tougher than they have been the last 3 or 4 years. And when you look out on a crowd and you see blood, that's what they want. It was a big responsibility for me at the time. We had many other farm rallies there at the time, but the farm groups, I wasn't a member. I mean, I'm a member of farm groups, but I wasn't a farm leader, except that people knew me to some extent in some parts of the country, and I was told that they just needed a guy that wouldn't make too many mistakes and go up there and say the right thing. So there's a lot of hard work done by farm groups on our behalf, and it just happened to be that I was given the privilege of representing 10,000 farmers that day.
Yeah. Well, you touched on how the prices were much lower and different than what they were now, and that's kind of my crux of a lot of what I think about things going forward. Is we do have a lot of really good times right now, and I know you and I have talked a lot, and maybe to kind of give the non-farm people some perspective. We're kind of in the, what I'd say is the tail end of a boom cycle. And maybe I could get yours and Devin, just kind of, what do you guys see for like the markets of what we raise going forward? Because we need a certain level of price to support what we do. So, I mean,
I don't know if you want me to go first, or you want Devin to go first there.
Devin, why don't you fire away? What do you see? What do you see the market doing? Oh, you're on mute.
I keep having issues with sound. I'm getting a lot of feedback.
Yeah, I keep hearing a little bit too, but I'm not really sure how we can make that better. Okay, Devin's gone.
Well, maybe I can take that one. Can I take that one?
Yeah, go ahead.
There's been a big change over the last few years as, the ethanol changed the whole game. And not only that, but low interest rates have really changed the way agriculture has gone forward. Where at one time, you only had 1 bushel of corn out of 10 going to ethanol production or less in the United States. Now you have about 4 bushels out of 10 going toward ethanol production in the United States. So suddenly you needed about 5 billion more bushels of corn in order to satisfy that demand. So what you saw was a big run up in prices over a period of the last 4 or 5 years, and that was accentuated in 2012 with a tremendous drought. So this combined with low interest rates and a push from the demand side of the equation pushed corn prices up into record levels, especially during the drought last year. And it's just changed the whole agricultural economy. If you look at a map of the ethanol plants in the United States around the Corn Belt, you can see just how much that has changed. There's just ethanol plants everywhere. They haven't always been profitable, but this was just like infusing all this new demand into the market. And so it changed the game for everything, and it wasn't, food demand itself, is on the rise over a period of time, but the ethanol demand was one thing that was put into the corn market, where all we had before was the food market and the feed market. So that has really changed the game with regard to corn. And of course now we have futures levels have fallen back from the record levels we had last year, and the supply of corn has increased to an extent where, it's hard to believe 13.46 billion bushels is normal, because I remember huge crops coming out of the United States at 8 billion bushels, and we thought the world was going to end. So that's how things change. And so we're just dealing with that now. We've had a recent run-up in soybeans because of the real hot weather you've had in the United States. But of course, we've got 60% of the world's soybeans are grown down in South America now. So that's how the world is changing. We still have these low interest rates. So to a large extent, these low interest rates aren't 23% anymore. And so maybe even at these low prices, and we can pay for our needs and keep going with farming. So, I mean, I've got all kinds of opinions about the price of corn and the price of soybeans and where it's going, but I'd sure like to hear from Jerod and Devin what you got to say about it too.
Well, yeah, and it's fascinating to me to listen to people talk about where the interest rates, I didn't live through that 20% interest. I mean, the highest I've ever paid was 10, and I thought that was murder. But when you're trying to run a business and everything that you might possibly garner off the top kind of goes back to just paying the interest on your, say, operating note or equipment lines or land. I mean, that changes the dynamics of agriculture and everything immensely. And I'm glad I've never went through that. I'm glad. I hats off to you guys that did, because that would take quite a bit of fortitude to maintain a business throughout that cycle. And I guess my thoughts on kind of you touched on, and you nailed it on how we got to the high prices, and maybe a kind of look going forward is, do we have to get cheap enough to buy back the demand that high corn has, or not in corn, but like all grains? Have we got to the point where we have to scale back to get the end users back in the game? And I'll even go to another step. The developing countries, and Philip, I know you traveled to other countries, and you could probably have way more insight to this than I do. But there's places where people are hungry now, and they can't afford the food, let alone when it's super expensive. So I don't know. Can you touch on something of that magnitude, Philip?
Yeah. Well. Yeah. I mean, but I was asked the question last year. I was speaking in Toronto, and we lost about 1.3 billion bushels of corn demand in about 1 year in the United States, and I made that statement. It was obvious. We went to $8 and $8 corn, and everybody that was using corn was shutting that off. And I just don't have the figures in front of me now, but we lost, I think at the time, 500 million bushels of ethanol demand, 300 and some from food residual, and there was some more left off over that. So it was about 1.2, 1.3 billion bushels of corn demand that we had lost because of high prices. Somebody put their hand up and they said to me, Phil, well, is the corn demand gone, or will it come back? And I said, the bottom line is it's gone. We ration demand, we've lost that demand, and the only way we'll get that demand back is if we put price down low enough where we will get that demand back, where end users will start using that corn again. And I think the fellow that asked me the question was somewhat surprised, that we had lost that demand. But come on, when you go from $4.50 corn to $8 corn overnight, not overnight, but over a period of about 8 or 9 months, I mean, you had corn demand shutting down all over, not only the United States and Canada, you had it shutting down all over the world. And not only that, you sent a tremendous signal to South America and other countries to grow corn. So what you have now, or grow feed grains, for instance. So what you have now is you had much more production in South America, but you also had production in places like the Ukraine, places like Russia, even where I'm from. In Ontario, you had a little bit more production, but now even Monsanto is talking about 8 to 10 million acres of corn in Western Canada. Now, that's hard to believe. It's almost delusional to think about because the growing season is very short up there. But anyway, this is what's happening in some of these other countries. I spend a lot of time in Bangladesh. I've been there 5 times over a period of 20 years. And it's a place where people are only one abject step away from poverty, where food is very important to them, and not everybody gets fed. So, but the last time I was there, which was January of this year, you could see it. The poverty rate had gone down, the economic growth had gone up. You could really, really see this because the Asian economy is changing. Why? Because of India and China. China, as you know, Jerod, takes a lot of corn to feed their people. But not necessarily everybody in Asia gets fed like we do. But, food is ubiquitous. There's food everywhere. I can go stop at a truck stop in Oklahoma or Michigan or Ohio or Ontario, and there's all kinds of food to eat behind the counter. It's just become ubiquitous in our society. But with regard to grain demand, unfortunately, the only way to get that demand back is to lower price to the extent to where we build it back. But, markets are like gravity. They fall a lot faster than you build them back up. And that's where we find ourselves now on a Sunday night in September to see what the markets will do, because we've got a big corn crop out there in the United States this year, and that's going to be really ugly when it comes to basis this fall in many locales.
Yeah, and I've heard you mention before that everybody talks about what if we get $4 corn, and my understanding is you're already there because of the crop you had last year. I mean, you're basically at a cost, much lower, or not a cost, excuse me, the price offering much lower than what we have, say in like a corn deficit area that I'm in Oklahoma. I mean, the dynamics of who has the corn where changes the game immensely, and you're kind of like forerunning that because Ontario had a great crop last year. I mean, that to me is almost a precursor to what we're going to see in the United States.
Well, I think it's a little bit different in the United States, and I know on this show we don't want to talk about what's going on in Ontario, Canada with regard to corn. I just think that your demand in the United States is so much more dynamic than it is in a place like Ontario. We actually have to drive the price of corn down so low in Ontario so we can export it to the United States. Now, the United States is the world's largest supplier of corn, and here we are as Canadians. We're trying to export our corn to you. It's like exporting snow to Canada in January. It doesn't make any sense, but that's what we have to do. So, like for instance, the new crop cash price for corn in Ontario now is below $4 a bushel. It's below $4 a bushel, and it's not going to go higher. Now, you did have the opportunity to forward contract some for $5. We simply produce too much corn for the end users we have. But I don't want to deal too much with Ontario because I think most of the viewers are some of our American viewers. Like in a place like Decatur, Illinois, which I find extremely interesting. The 5-county area around there, they produce more corn around Decatur, Illinois than most countries do. And their basis levels are fairly buoyant because their demand structure is so inherently dynamic. And that's the way I see it in the United States now. You also have the U.S. economy right now that's getting better. Jerod and you and I, and maybe Devin, we might disagree about American politics, and I don't want to comment on it because I'm a Canadian. But the American economy is getting better, and that's a very, very good thing. And if this Syria thing blows over, that would be a good thing too in terms of for the economy, because if we have an unexpected Tuesday come along out of Syria, that'll upset the whole apple cart and it'll upset the agricultural economy too.
Yeah. Well, and that's just one of the many unknowns that's kind of creeping around in the market right now. Is what's going to happen? What's going to go on next to the next thing to blow up? But Devin's back here now, and I kind of shift gears right quick. Can you hear me, Devin?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right, that sounds great. Your earbuds might help.
Yeah, I think this will work a little better.
All right, say everybody's probably heard or read the hashtag super spraying, and I don't know if everybody knows that you are the guy. You're the man, the original super sprayer that came up with that. As far as I know, unless you could correct me.
As far as I know, that was my hashtag. But yeah, it's kind of funny how that's blown up. It's all over the world.
Yeah, I see guys that I don't follow and you don't follow, people that I don't even know, but all of a sudden everybody's a super sprayer, they're super sorghum, and I think you deserve some damn back money because, hell, you're the one that came up with all this super whatever.
Yeah, and I guess the super sorghum hashtag, I guess there's a little contest going on with that, if I'm not mistaken, with the national sorghum producers.
Really? No, I haven't heard that. I mean, you know, you and I joke around because most of the time we're out spraying in, you know, middle of the day, you know, just kind of fill people in. Devin and I both farm. We're young, and we both do all our own spraying. Philip, I think you do your own spraying too. I mean, a lot of guys
do my own spraying, yes.
A lot of guys do their own chemical work, and I'll get to where this is going in a minute. But you know, one of the big questions that I got last week and got again this week, everybody and their dog is concerned about GMOs, and pesticides aren't really GMOs, but because there are Roundup Ready crops, and there's all this, you know, resistance built into stuff, and now built into weeds in places. You know, what are we, just kind of off the cuff? Like, I'll start with Devin. What are your thoughts on when people, like, when you hear somebody say, "Oh, I don't want GMO crops"? I mean, what do you want to tell those people? Just what's your thoughts? I mean, do they understand what they are even talking about?
I think a lot of people kind of are off base on that subject, but you know, let's say a crop like cotton, for example, that's GMO. That has saved probably, I don't even know the percentage, but it's a high percentage of chemical usage that doesn't have to be used because of the GMO gene in cotton. There's a lot less insecticide that has to be used on it, and you know that's just something about cotton. Insects are terrible in it, and with the Bolgard trait, which is a GMO trait, you know, it saved three or four passes worth of insecticide that would have had to been applied before.
Yeah, and I'll kind of go back to, I've heard Philip mention before. He talks about he would almost rather have regular non-Roundup Ready soybeans because it's kind of a, I mean, and he'll correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a bit of a farce. You don't even need that Roundup Ready gene. Is that right, Philip?
Well, I've heard you guys talk about how Roundup is a grass killer in Oklahoma, in parts of Oklahoma, because you have problems with Roundup Ready marestale and giant ragweed. I've got the same problems. We call marestale up here Canada fleabane, and I don't grow Roundup Ready soybeans. I never have. I've not done that. You know, I grew up all my life without Roundup, and I've just continued to grow non-GMO soybeans. There's premiums for them up here, and we've done rather well with them through the years. The problem I'm finding now is that I have Roundup Ready corn, and I have to put conventional herbicides on these crops. And I noticed Devin would say that back in the early days on Twitter, that you guys would have to use 2 or 3 modes of action just to kill these Roundup Ready weeds that you have in Oklahoma. And, you know, I find that this is really a problem for farmers because in good times, you can make an argument that maybe it really doesn't matter because the revenues are there to pay for this technology. But you got to give us something of value. And if we went back to a little bit more difficult agricultural economic times, you know, we need more value for some of this technology. Roundup Ready technology is getting close to useless in our fields because we've got all these Roundup Ready weeds. The other thing that I think is extremely important to mention, though, like from a Canadian perspective, and maybe from a U.S. perspective as well, genetic modification has segregated markets. For instance, you remember when they found, the USDA found that genetically modified wheat in Oregon. Well, why was that such a big deal? Well, it was a big deal because your buyers for U.S. wheat didn't want any genetic modification, and there never really been any genetic modification in U.S. wheat, Canadian either. And suddenly, when there is, it's a real problem. The problem is the cat has been, the toothpaste has been out of the tube for a long time, the cat's been out of the bag for a long time, and it's not going back in. And now you're going to have genetic modification, like you're going to have Enlist soybeans, where you're going to have Roundup dicamba soybeans, so you can spray your soybeans with Roundup dicamba. Well, I know we got tomatoes around me, and if I start spraying soybeans with a dicamba product, we're going to have to worry about that too. I'm not against progress, but let's recognize what some of this genetic modification is. It's one way for big ag corporations to make a lot of profit and sell a lot of herbicide. Why don't we have genetic modification for health benefits for humans or something like that? Why don't we have genetic modification for something else that would increase the nutrient value in some of our food, not just sell a lot of spray? So, there's quite a few issues around this. I think we've chatted about it through the years.
Yeah, I'd say, you've probably heard about the is it the rice? And I forget what country.
The golden rice.
Yeah, the golden rice that was, could have basically helped I don't know the number, but a lot of kids with the vitamin deficiencies at a young age, and also helped them maintain their eyesight in a poor country. To me, that's almost the extreme opposite view. Like, we are so anti, this idea of GMO that, we essentially could have helped millions of kids, and that was thrown out the window because we don't want, quote, GMO stuff. I'm not exactly familiar with the details of it, but I know that did happen, and I don't even know if they've ever allowed the rice back in, or if that just went away.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the golden rice, and I've been over to Asia, and it's not exactly what it might seem, but to me, we could talk a lot about the inherent corrupt structure of the rice market in Asia, and how that might work into that. But I don't really think we want to on the show. But my issue is that with genetic modification, we have to give farmers value for that. And it was very clear when Roundup Ready soybeans come along. All you had to do was spray them with Roundup, and boom, it was magic. And what we're finding now is that the magic is wearing off. And I've talked to Devin a few times, and Jerod, you mentioned it too. You guys add all kinds of like 2 or 3 different chemical actions in your sprayer to kill some of these Roundup Ready weeds. So, genetic modification has, you take what they've done in corn hybrids, it's been, I think you could argue that it's been a good thing for us in some ways, but our costs are rising because of it now. And, big ag corporations have to recognize this.
Yeah, well, and I think that you could kind of even go back to that, maybe how Devin got the term super spraying is him and I both have had to learn how to spray certain plants where you can actually kill them, and how to spray, and maybe that is all back to the GMO discussion. We have to kill Frankenshit. Devin, you could probably touch on that. You do more spraying than I do.
I'm still having trouble hearing you guys.
Okay.
It seems like whoever's talking, I get 2 of those guys on my screen, and it just overlaps each other.
I'm not sure how we fix that. Kind of the first show, it's gone to shit type deal. I don't know any way to put it. Okay, I'll just got to jump around to another deal. Even if we do double talk, I don't think people understand how many days of the year would you say you work? Like, this is kind of back to the, why do you farm and everything else. I don't think people understand. I don't know many guys that have Saturdays and Sundays off and paid holidays, and there's all this other stuff. I mean, just kind of, Devin, what would you say? How many days a year do you work?
I'd say, I don't know days exactly, but let's say I'm planting something probably 10 months out of the year. I'm planting some kind of crop.
Or harvesting or spraying,
or harvesting.
You're just basically working that.
I think January. I'd say January is about the only month that it's really not just something pressing going on. February we get into top dressing wheat, spring wheat with herbicides, and then we get into March, which was when we plant corn here, and April is soybeans. Into April is milo, cotton. It just goes from there. We get into wheat harvest on June. So it's just something never ending going on here, pretty much.
Well, and that's what I want people to understand, maybe that don't really know about farming, is that we may be doing different jobs, but we're doing them all the time. It's, you just kind of, and if you have downtime, you want to spend it with your family, so there's not a lot of, quote, free time. And I don't know, Philip, could you touch on kind of what, your work schedule is? It you think it kind of fits what we're saying about down here?
Well, I commented to Devin the other day that I just can't imagine. From our perspective, it seems like you guys, especially, like Devin, works all the time. And I said to him, when do you ever have time off? Like, for instance, he's been picking corn down in El Reno for the last few weeks. And, we won't pick corn here till November the 1st. And it just seems like to me he works awful all the time, and which is probably true. But eventually you have to stop or you get too exhausted. I know you're both young and tough right now, but let me tell you, things change, and there comes a time when you have to slow down. And he told me, he said, I just have to quit sometimes and get some rest. Like, for instance, with me, we'll get snow here in November, and sometimes not till December, but large parts of Canada will get snow in October. And it's wintertime here till April, and that's when we start planting corn in April and sometimes in May. So nothing happens here in terms of cropping in most of Canada during the months, Ontario from late November to early April. And so unless you have livestock where you're working every day and feeding them and dealing with manure, and I can understand that. But in terms of cropping, it's a lot like Iowa and Minnesota and Northern Illinois and places like that. And so I said to Devin the other day, I said, I just couldn't imagine, and Jerod, you're the same way. I've seen you guys comment on Twitter about you're out and it's 100 degrees, 105 degrees, and like
115 last
just
year.
Built with that, but it never ends for you guys. It just never ends, that heat. You're just out in it every day. I don't think it's been as hot this year, but last year it was really hot for you guys. And for the most part, you've responded. You said, well, we're used to that here, and you get used to it.
Yeah, well, I think, and I can't speak for Devin, but we were just born here. I mean, I don't know that either of us really. We didn't say we're going to farm here, but it's kind of was ingrained to me from an early age that you just suck it up and do it because that's where you're at. And I don't know. What do you think, Devin?
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of the hand you're dealt, and you just figure out how to make it work.
Yeah. But I'll agree with you, Philip, about how there does come a point that you can't work yourself right down into the ground. And I mean, then I guess that kind of leads me to my next subject. Like, how do you guys maintain your family? Or I mean, I've got kids, and Philip, I know you just sent one off to college, and that's a huge divide of of time, work, and everything else, and everybody's got families. So.
Well, from my perspective, I think that that's the whole enchilada, right? And for instance, I often make the comment that it's not about me, and when you get a family, it's not about you, and so you do whatever it takes. And I've known Devin for a long time, but I never knew whether he was married or not, or whether I thought he had a girlfriend, but I just couldn't really quite figure it out at times. But I told him that eventually things change, and then it's not about you, and all you do is work the rest of your life hoping your family has something, and so that's just the way it's going to work. So when you're young and tough all the time, you can do anything, and I have no problem with that. I let technology, I have tractors that steer themselves, just like you guys do, and but when the family's around, and it's still that way for me. That's what I'm doing. I just work for the family all the time, and that's what I do. And I'm sure you guys, when the time will come along, that's what you'll be doing too. We shouldn't give Devin too much of a hard time, because he's probably one of the most eligible bachelors in the Twitterverse. So.
Yep, I think he just had to drop out. Maybe he lost the call, but yeah, I don't. I'm pretty sure Devin's not married, but he might be, like you said, the most eligible bachelor on Twitter, farm wise. But really quick, Philip, and maybe Devin will jump back in here. Oh, there he is. Hey, real quick, Devin, are you married? You're not, are you? Devin, can you hear me?
Yes, barely.
We were just asking. We weren't sure. We're pretty sure you're not married, right?
No, I'm not married.
So you got all the free time in the world to just work.
I've got a pretty serious girlfriend. She's actually not too happy I'm on this conference call right now, so because it's the only time. The weekends is the only time she really gets to see me, because during the week I'll get home 10:30, 11 o'clock, and she usually gets to bed at 9. So that's just kind of how it goes all week. So she expects me to be more available on the weekend. So.
Well, there you go. I mean, that's a real life, I mean, I guess more than anything, if people are watching this at home, I just kind of wanted to take away that, we're real people with families and lives and girlfriends and kids and everything else. And, that's how agriculture really is. It's a bunch of people that are, do their work and like what they do. And, we could speculate about everything around here, but that's the reality, is that we're all just kind of, we're in this and doing it. And which leads me to my next deal. Maybe I can have you guys speculate a little more, but where do you see ag in like the next 1, 5, 10 years? And Devin, I'll just jump back to you.
Where do you
kind of see things going?
Well, I know in my area, the next, say, 5 to 10 years, there will probably be a lot of changes, because most of the farmers in my area are pretty high up in age. So I would say within the next 10 years, for sure, a lot of those are going to be retired. And I really don't know a whole lot of young farmers in my area that would, be available to take that over. So we're going to have to get bigger. I'm going to have to take on more acres, or, along those lines. So.
Yeah, and you and I've talked about this on Twitter and other places. I mean, you kind of have, you're about one of the few young guys I know, and sure enough, one of the young guys who's doing it on his own, like I am. I mean, and I think we kind of see the writing on the wall that there's not a lot of, there's just not a lot of young guys in agriculture, at least in our area. I'm sure there are other places, but they also might have, more like trust fund farmers that kind of get all the shit by for them. So, I mean, I don't know, Philip, what do you think about the future?
Well, I think it depends where you are. Like, for instance, I would be very interested in going down to visit both you guys, because I think that I'd really get an education on that type of thing, because I'm more like the Eastern Corn Belt, where, and our biggest problem, well, in terms of entry to agriculture, is the high price of land right now, the fixed price of land. And I've often thought in Western Canada, and I suppose in the Western United States, where land is not as expensive, that there might be more opportunity. Like for instance, here and in the Eastern Corn Belt of the United States, I think there's going to have to be some type of structural change, so people who want to crop land will be able to do that and still deal with the high cost of land. But keep in mind, the price of land has always been high, no matter when it's been and where it's been, and people have invested in that anyway. Right now, you said 1, 5, 10 years. This low interest rate policy that we've had across the Western world for so long has really changed the game. I always say it's like testosterone to the agricultural economy, or it's like ether to an old Massey tractor. She just starts, it's just interest rates are really a stimulus to the agricultural economy. So even if prices get lower, you can tend to make your payments. So in terms of young people getting in, actually in my area, I think that, and in the Eastern Corn Belt as far as that goes, you'll in 300 years somebody will still be farming my land, but it might be something different than I could even imagine. Now we have these these drone planes that fly into crop pictures, and we have tractors that drive themselves. So a whole thing we can't hardly imagine. Also in Canada, we have different systems of agricultural economics for some of our agricultural commodities, and it leads to a more profitable picture for some, and we're getting new entrants into that business. So it depends on where you are, and like I'd say, I'd like to visit you guys to see what it's like, and then I'd have a little bit better opinion how it's going to go. But in this area, in the Eastern Corn Belt, I think it's going to be, there's still people trying to get in, but they might have to get in a little bit differently than we did past.
Well, it's amazing to me the difference, like you just pointed out, from one end to the other. I mean, I don't think any of us would be considered in the middle of the Corn Belt. Philip, you're probably closer than Devin and I are. We're basically wheat belt people. But is there anything else you guys would like to throw out there, or any questions you got for me, or questions for each other? I'm just going to throw it open, and
Gentlemen,
Devin, you got anything? Oh,
we're down to
Jack's
the last
speaking.
3 minutes. The voice is speaking now. So how about a 1 minute wind up from each of you, and then we will turn the network over to your brand and Dead Air for a couple of moments, and then Cal's Confident Corner will fire up in about 5 to 7 minutes, and the Zero Hedge crowd will take over the network for the next hour. So with the last 3 minutes or so of your airtime, Jerod, I want to thank you and your hosts, your guests, for coming on air. And what is their last thought? 1 minute each.
all right, Devin, why don't you go ahead?
I don't even know where to start. Thanks guys for inviting me on this deal. I think this will really be a good thing to probably keep going and get the word out there in a way from our perspective. I don't know what else to say. Go ahead, Jerod.
All right, Philip, what do you want to add?
I think this is really good for me, especially. I made some good friends on Twitter. Devin and Jerod are some of my original Twitter buddies, and I got to chat with Devin the other day on FaceTime. I learned a heck of a lot. Sure, we might have some sound issues, and I've been trying to control it the best I can from this end. But I mean, I got a plethora of people that would sure like to look into this type of thing. We could have shows on different issues, whether it be corn or cotton or beef or farmland prices or anything like that, and to talk about farming, because we have a lot in common. And one thing we can have in common is about social media and Twitter. We could talk about that sometime too. So it has been a pleasure to get together with my friends here. I do appreciate Jerod, you inviting me and my colleague Devin on to chat with you today.
Well, I want to thank you guys for coming on and taking time out of your Sunday. And Devin, I hope your girlfriend isn't too pissed. Maybe she'll kind of get over it. And
She'll get
Philip,
over it.
likewise. Thank you guys very much for coming on here. And I just want to kind of tell everybody, we're just trying to figure out how to do this. I think it's cool to give people the real side of agriculture. And, the best I can do is just keep going, and we're going to see where this leads. And I want to thank Jack Barnes and everybody involved with BTFDtv for letting me come on here and air a bunch of stuff and just come talk about, just about anything. Jack, do you want to add anything before we go?
I just want to thank each and every one of you for having come on air and joining us and giving us your professional opinions. And going forward, I really like the idea of this becoming a Sunday show. And you guys can literally tell us what crops are going in the ground, what crops are coming out, what kind of yields you're getting, what kind of super spraying you have to do. And just each Sunday, let us know where we're at in the agricultural window, and bring on more farmers. And then I can't wait to hear about single farmers and dating on the finding. What do you guys use Twitter to find each other now? Is that the new single dating approach for farmers?
Never thought of that.
Never thought of it. All
Actually,
right, there's an episode.
I was still my deal worked out the old-fashioned way. I found her in a bar. So,
all right, gentlemen. On behalf of BTFD Productions and Jerod's How Farms Really Work, this is Jack Barnes, and we are now taking the network to dark air for 3 minutes or so, and then you will have Calibrated Confidence back on. Thank you, everyone, for watching.
All right.
Yeah,
We're still in the chat room.
The sound issues, I could